Today's show is sponsored by Kyrios Consulting. That is Kyrios with a Y, Kyrios. Real estate investing can be intimidating. That's why you don't do it alone. Kyrios Consulting gets you from no real estate to your first rental property. My friend Steve did it right here in New Hampshire, and he wants to help other Christians do the same. Visit consultingbykyrios.com. Again, that's with a Y, consultingbykyrios.com. No more excuses. The world needs more Christians with passive income, not more passive Christians. Make it happen. The link is in the description. All right, everybody, back to the channel. Glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. Yesterday, I was talking to my brother about various things, including the Mets, and I told my brother I'm ready to be hurt again. You know what I mean? I'm a full believer. And, of course, that night, the Mets decided to hurt me again. Hey, it's okay. I'm used to it, man. I'm used to it. You know, I've almost come to enjoy it. You know what I mean? You gotta. Sometimes you gotta. When you're a fan of a certain team, you gotta learn to enjoy the losing. You know what I mean? I've totally come to terms with that with the Jets. In fact, when the Jets are devastating losses and stuff like that, that's where I feel the most joy. It's kind of twisted, to be honest. But in any case, that's not what we're here to talk about today. What we're here to talk about today is a couple things. Joe Boot is the main event, and I want to talk about Joe Boot. I greatly respect Joe Boot, and Joe Boot's material has helped me tremendously. I don't think I've ever read an entire Joe Boot book, but I have read parts of Joe Boot books, and I've seen quite a bit of Joe Boot content online and interviews and things like that. And I agree with Joe Boot a lot of times. Joe Boot is good people as far as I'm concerned. So Joe Boot is okay by me, but Joe Boot has a problem. And I want to try to dissect what is Joe Boot's problem. That's what's coming up next on my channel. How many times can a guy say Joe Boot? I don't know. It's kind of like Joe Mayo. Remember from Seinfeld? They just kept saying Joe Mayo, you know. Anyway, but yeah. So let's get a few things out of the way before we talk about Joe Boot. The first one is James Lindsay, and I've seen a number of people bring this up, and I had never thought of it this way, but it's really true. I mean, it's allegedly true. But if you read James Lindsay's Twitter threads, I mean, it is quite a scene. Like I don't really believe too much in like the psychiatry and psychology, like the mental health thing. I mean, obviously there are parts of it that are true and good to think through. But I'm not like a big like mental health advocate. I mean, again, there's always truth in all kinds of shenanigans and chicanery. But I'm not the kind of guy that's going to be like, the first thing I see is I'm going to start to try to diagnose it. But I got to be honest with you, we need a team on James Lindsay's Twitter threads. I mean, I've heard a number of people describe this schizophrenic. This is like reading the ravings of a schizophrenic. That's what it's like. I'm not diagnosing James Lindsay. I'm just trying to tell you what my experience is reading these tweets. We don't even need one or two professionals on this. We need a team to just analyze James Lindsay's Twitter threads, especially about the current things, and it truly does read as like a schizophrenic just kind of going in. And just whatever comes to his mind, that's what he decides to write. It's just craziness. This is insanity. I'm not going to read this. This is crazy. I'm afraid if I read this out loud, you might go crazy. I'm already crazy, so I've already read it, and it's okay because I'm kind of like inoculated to it a little bit. I'm already crazy. But you might not be. So what you don't want to do under any circumstances is go to James Lindsay's Twitter feed and read it, because you might catch the schizophrenia. I don't know. And he's also like one of these guys that's known for changing his Twitter name a lot. So it'll be James Lindsay and then, comma, this is what I am. He changes it constantly. Again, I mean, I'm not a doctor or anything. It strikes me as a little schizophrenic. I'm not going to lie. And it wouldn't surprise me at all to see him change his name soon to James Lindsay, schizophrenic. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying he is a schizophrenic, but I'm just saying, if he was, would he be? Well, if he was, would he be doing anything differently? I don't know. That's all I'm saying. Let's speaking of crazy people, let's move on to Thabiti Anyabwile. It's not even his real name, it's from what I understand. People keep correcting me and they say his real name is Ron Byrne, but then he changed it or something. I don't know, to sound more ethnic. I mean, I don't know. I can look at you and know you're ethnic. I don't need it. The Thabiti. People put a lot of meaning to the fact that he changed his name, and I got to be honest with you, that all strikes me as very accurate. I mean, think about it. Think about your own name. Your own name. Adam Robles. My name is Adam Robles. It's like your identity. This is part of who you are. You were given this name. You didn't get to choose your name. You were given your name. There's so much meaning behind that. My father, when I was a baby, gave me this name. And his father gave him his name, and so on and so on and so on down the line, all the way from the beginning of time to Adam. And it's your name is just so fundamental of who you are. And now imagine what it would take to get you to change your name. Now, we all kind of know certain people that go through certain things, with their parents and stuff, and they decide to change their name, and you totally understand why. I mean, this is why people aren't named Adolf anymore. Maybe some people are. I don't know. I don't know. Your last name is Hitler, a perfectly fine name. At least I assume it was. I'm not German. What do I know? A perfectly fine name, but, if you just happen to have the name Hitler as well, maybe you don't go by Hitler anymore. You can understand some of that stuff, right? But think about, to change your name and then just say, I'm going to choose Thabiti Anyabwile. It's there's something going on there. But that's not why I'm trying to criticize Thabiti Anyabwile. Listen to this tweet. And I obviously, this is very obvious what he's doing here. But just think about this. He says, J.D. Vance, referring to the vice presidential debate, J.D. Vance is beating Walz so badly that Walz spends half his time agreeing with and humanizing Vance. Just let that sink in for just a moment. This is from the guy who's friends with the people that are, the Imago Dei. I mean, you the least of these. You love your neighbor. There's human. They're made in the image of God. And this man who's got a pretty squeaky clean image, even to this day, he's got a squeaky clean image. Now, I know people criticize him now, which is more than what usually happens with Big Eva goons, but, but for the most part, he's still well respected in our circles. And he's upset. He's disappointed that Walz is treating his opponent as a human. He's humanizing J.D. Vance. We shouldn't be humanizing J.D. Vance. This man is psychotic. This is a degenerate. This is disgusting behavior. For all the talk about how you're dehumanizing the immigrants, you're dehumanizing the least of these, and all this stuff. Even if you think they are by their rhetoric, you know what I mean? They're criminals, whatever the rhetoric. You still have to assume that they're implying that they're not human, right? Very few people come out and say, man, I really wish that that the Republicans would stop humanizing the immigrants. There are some people who say that, but very few. Usually, you have to imply it based on what they said. They said that they're degenerates. They said that they're like animals. The MS-13, they're like animals. So clearly, he just thinks all Latinos are like animals. You see what I'm trying to say. You have to imply things. They don't come out and say it. Thabiti has no problem. He feels totally comfortable saying, yeah, I don't want to humanize J.D. Vance. You don't treat those people like humans. They're monsters. That's what makes him upset. He wasn't so upset that the debate was being lost. I mean, that's a separate issue. He's upset that the debate was being lost and in the process humanized J.D. Vance. Thabiti Anyabwile is a sick, disgusting man. Words, they're not even strong enough words for how disgusting and disturbed this man is. He's a complete degenerate. I mean, this is I mean, it's a little icky. Icky. That's a strong word. It's icky. I remember too, like there were certain people that I used to get a lot of flack for daring to even criticize whatsoever. And Thabiti was one of them. Now, he has this reputation that touch not the Lord's anointed. And I would say the most mild stuff about Thabiti Anyabwile. And I've had more than one in-person meetings with various levels of Big Eva enforcers talking about how dare I say what I said about Thabiti. He's one of the saints. How dare you criticize him or disagree with him? The truth is, I was too generous with Thabiti. Way too generous. I didn't go hard enough. This is a deeply disturbed individual. Thabiti Anyabwile is a sick, sick man. And I don't mean to soften it by saying it's just not sin. It is sin. So when I say sick, I don't mean sick like he caught the flu or something, or caught schizophrenia from reading James Lindsay's tweet. What I mean is he's a sick individual, and he chose to be sick. And if I'm not mistaken, he preached this eloquent sermon about the root of bitterness and things like that, and he apologized for XYZ with the root of bitterness. This guy has done nothing about his root of bitterness. Nothing. He's let it grow, and he's cultivated it, and he's put a little fertilizer in there. And you get to the place where you're upset that your political opponents, who have done nothing to you, nothing. You're upset that they're being humanized. And I got to be honest with you. I don't care about J.D. Vance as an individual. I don't know the man personally. I'm pretty close with people who do know the man. I mean, listen, you guys are afraid that we're making inroads into the halls of power. You should be afraid, because we are. Because we are. And a lot of my friends are highly competent, highly connected people. If I were you, and you think Christian nationalism is the devil, it's the worst possible thing. If I were you, I would be very afraid of all of the highly competent people, the highly connected people, the highly resourced people that are making inroads. But I don't care about, I don't know J.D. Vance, right? I don't know him. What I know about him, I like very much. I don't know him. My concern is that you got to realize that Thabiti, he thinks this about you. He thinks this about you. Because in his mind, J.D. Vance is an orc. And who else would support an orc but besides other orcs? So if you are supporting J.D. Vance like I am, if you're supporting this, then he's worried about you being humanized and me. He's worried about you being treated as a human being and me. And I got to be honest with you, I do not think that Thabiti's opinion here is not common in Big Eva circles. This is the standard posture. For all their talk about loving your neighbor and love believes all things and the Imago Dei, they are full of it. They are full of it. They don't care about any of that stuff. It's all just a political maneuver. They wield those verses like a sledgehammer that they can sledge you over the head to get you to do what they want. But the minute it's their opponents, there is no grace. There is no mercy. They don't care about that. These are political enemies that do not care about the things you care about. They don't. They are disgusted by your very existence. Just like they're disgusted that J.D. Vance got treated like a human being. He was humanized. I mean, this is a low bar. We're not even talking treating him well, treating him nicely, treating him like a dignified person. We're talking about humanizing. So he's upset that J.D. Vance might appear more human. Because to Thabiti, you and me, J.D. Vance, all the people who support him, we're all orcs. The rules that apply to human beings do not apply to us. We all see where this leads. This is highly disturbing. He's a highly disturbed individual. There's just no question about it. And these people, they're not going to get their way. That much is clear. They're not going to get their way. So I don't want to hear any black pilling about the gulags and this and that. They're not going to get their way. We are going to win. We are winning, and we are going to win. And we're going to continue to win. I just wanted to point that out. Like, a lot of these guys that I used to treat them with kid gloves, man. I really did. I used to treat them with kid gloves. And I got a lot of flack for even treating them with kid gloves. But they were and are way worse than I ever imagined. Thabiti Anyabwile is a disgusting individual. Here's someone who's not a disgusting individual. Dr. Joe Boot. I guess I can call him Joe. His handle is Joe, but just to be safe, I want to be respectful. I'm going to call him Dr. Joseph Boot. We're not on a first name basis, you know what I mean? I'm going to be respectful. You know what? Matter of fact, I'm going to take my hat off. Wish I had a little bow tie I could wear, you know? Dr. Joseph Boot. This guy is not a disturbed individual. He's not a disgusting individual. He's not a sick individual. But he is acting, in my opinion, highly emotional. Highly emotional. In fact, I don't even know if he's really acting. He's more reacting. He's in a very reactive kind of place, Dr. Joseph Boot. And that's not a very safe place to be. When you're in a place where you're reactive as opposed to proactive, that's not a good place to be. That's not a position of power. And I'm not saying you can't get out of it, and I'm not saying that you can't be effective all the time, like automatically. If you're reactive, you're in the wrong. Because some people try to say that. If you're reacting, then you're wrong. No. It's not like that. But it is a dangerous place to be, and it is a place that you don't want to be. You want to be setting the tone. You don't want to be reacting to things. And it's just like in sports, you know? You want to be the one that the other team has to change their game plan to accommodate for. You don't want to be in the position where you've got to change your game plan to accommodate for something you weren't expecting. And Joseph Boot finds himself in a highly emotional and highly reactive situation. Here we have a tweet from Dr. Stephen Wolf. I guess I'm friends with Stephen Wolf to a certain degree. At least we're friendlies, and he's given me permission to not use his title. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to use it anyway. Dr. Stephen Wolf. Dr. Stephen Wolf says this: America should crush the enemies of God's chosen people. Now, what Stephen is doing here is, in my opinion, very obvious. But obviously, not everybody thought it was as obvious as I thought it was. Because what he was doing was essentially kind of going along with the messaging of post-war consensus people, where our greatest ally Israel, God's chosen people. No price is too high to defend Israel. No cost is too high. We must, at all costs, even to our own detriment, empty the treasuries, empty the war chest, empty the armory, pull out all the stops for Israel and Israel's defense. So what he's doing is he's riffing off that, but not saying Israel. So it's now you're not really sure what he's saying. What he's saying is he's talking about Christians. But you're not really sure because he's using the language of the post-war consensus. Now, this is a very, he's doing this intentionally. He's being purposely a little ambiguous just to catch all kinds of people in all kinds of twisted up, weird inconsistencies with their own ideologies. That's the point of this. That's why he's doing it. I see Dr. White often say, Stephen knows exactly what he's doing, and I tend to agree. He sure does. And for some reason, you keep falling for it. You keep falling for it. That's why he keeps doing it. So you got to take your hat off to Dr. Stephen. I mean, if I had a hat on, I would. But Joseph Boot here replies, and this is how Dr. Joseph Boot. He's much more than a reply guy. But Dr. Stephen Wolfe has turned Dr. Joseph Boot into a reply guy. And that, again, not a good place to be. Now, I'm not saying you can't reply to tweets because it's always wrong. I'm not going to say that. It's just not true. But often when you're the reply guy, it's not a good spot to be. It's not a position of power, put it that way. It's not an advantageous decision. It's like Anakin Skywalker taking the low ground. Obi-Wan Kenobi has the high ground. You don't want to be Anakin, no matter how powerful you are. Anakin was very powerful. And I'd argue, many people think Anakin was more powerful than Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, I'd argue Obi-Wan was probably more powerful, but this is all side nonsense. Who cares? What are we, nerds? But even a very powerful, evil Sith Lord could not overcome the positioning of where he was. He was in a disadvantageous position, and he ended up losing his legs for it. So to this very basic, America should crush the enemies of God's chosen people tweet, this is how Dr. Joseph Boot responds. He says, recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it be possible, as much as it lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in doing so, thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. That, of course, is Romans 12, verses 17 through 21. Now, you have heard those verses quoted on my channel so many times. And there's just no doubt about it. There are certain verses that I quote again and again and again. I've even talked about this in my book as well, and I've written about this. This is something that I consistently talk about. And the reason why is because I've heard this quoted to me hundreds of times in response to theonomy. I'm a theonomist. I've never hid that. A lot of people didn't know that about me, but I've never hid it. But I'm a theonomist, and so I've heard this response every time, almost, that I talk to someone who's not a theonomist about theonomy. And they use this as if this is a knockdown, like this is it. This defeats theonomy in and of itself. And the reason why I say Dr. Joseph Boot is in a very emotional place, a very emotional and highly reactive place, a very disadvantageous position, is because Dr. Joseph Boot himself is a theonomist. So I know he has heard this exact same thing about theonomy again and again and again. And Dr. Joseph Boot is an intelligent man, more intelligent than I am. At least I would assume. So he has turned into his own reply guy. Because this verse has nothing to do, nothing, with what Stephen said. Just like when I talk about theonomy and the civil government, this verse has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. Nothing. And I've always found it so amazing because Romans 12, and I've said this probably 100 times on my channel, Romans 12 comes right before Romans 13. See, that's the level of intelligence I'm operating at. 12 comes before 13. And it's the very next number. 13 is the very next number after 12. And so if you're reading a book and chapter 12 says something, and then chapter 13 says something Kind of similar context if you're reading a normal book. It should pick up right where it left off. And so Romans 12 is talking about the individual's interactions with people. Recompense no man evil for evil. We've been through this so many times, but I've never had to correct a theonomist about this because theonomists understand this. I've corrected all kinds of Big Eva goons and all kinds of people who don't like the Old Testament and all kinds of New Covenant theology type people, all kinds of liberal Christians. But I've never had to correct a theonomist about this because I thought we all got it. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. I will repay, says the Lord. So you don't get revenge on your enemies. I will repay. I am the Lord. I will get vengeance. And let me just take a minute here. Because I guess I have to talk to theonomists about this as well. It's just unbelievable to me that this is where we are at. So here we go. So this is, got to get the King James here. Hold on. This is Romans 13, right? Right after he says, vengeance is mine. Do not repay, beloved, evil for evil. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. Vengeance, it's a very important word to remember. Keep it in your mind. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. I will repay. Here's what Romans 13 says. Let every person be subject. This is the same thought. You got to remember. This is the same thought. The chapter divisions weren't there in the beginning. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. So who's responsible for the civil governing authority? God is. There's no authority except for God. They were instituted by God. Remember, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. The very next chapter, we're talking about God, the Lord, instituting civil governing authorities. Let's keep reading. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. Listen carefully. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval, for he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is the servant of God, an avenger. Another version says a revenger, who carries out God's wrath, his vengeance upon the wrongdoer. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. The civil government is mine, says the Lord. I'm paraphrasing here, and I'm offering my own little riff on this. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. The civil government is mine, says the Lord. And the civil government is there to carry out vengeance upon the evildoer. It's the same thought. So how is it that Joseph Boot here is quoting something completely irrelevant to what Stephen is saying? How did it happen? I have some theories. So first off, and I'm going to go from my more hinged theories to my less hinged theories. So we're going to start off with some stuff that's probably pretty easy to understand, and then I'm going to go to what I actually believe. This is what I actually believe, and it won't surprise you to know that I actually believe the least hinged theory of all of this. Oh, and by the way, I'm not the only idiot out there that noticed this. Let me just point this one out to you. So this is a beautiful classic. This is why I'm on Twitter. This is beautiful. We've got Stephen's tweet here. America should crush the enemies of God's chosen people. Then we've got Dr. Joseph Boot being the reply guy. Inexplicably, a theonomist being the reply guy. And then we've got Bendel Wary, who says, not even you believe this applies to the state. And he's quote tweeting Dr. Joseph Boot, reply guy. And this is what he said. It was the same day. This is an hour before he becomes 2 hours. 2 hours before he reply guys Stephen Wolf. Joseph Booth says, militarily, America and Britain should stand strong against the Iranian Islamic theocracy hell-bent on the total destruction of our political ally, Israel. I need a second Zin. I mean, this is a kill shot. This is a kill shot from Bendel Wary. And I got to be honest with you, a common kill shot. This is a common Bendel Wary kill shot. He does it all the time. Look at the timeline here. I want you to see the timeline here. It just baffles me. 8 hours ago, Dr. Joseph Booth says America should stand strong militarily against the Islamic theocracy hell-bent on the total destruction of our political ally, Israel. Then Stephen, an hour later, and I haven't talked to Stephen, but it is highly possible in my opinion, that Stephen saw Joseph's tweet here saying we need to militarily destroy the enemies of Israel and said, I'm going to write the same tweet, except I'm going to make it ambiguous so that the people can see how ridiculous and hypocritical and insane it is to say we should do this with Israel, but not Christians. So he says almost the exact same thing. He deletes some parts of it to make it ambiguous to set his trap. He says almost the same thing. America should crush the enemies of God's chosen people. Instead of saying Israel, he says chosen people. And instead of saying, the military, whatever, he just says crush the enemies. He makes it more ambiguous. I don't think anyone would argue that the Iranian Islamic theocracy is an enemy of Israel. So he's replaced the enemies of God, from Iranian Islamic theocracy, and he's replaced God's chosen people with Israel. Send tweet. And the very person who said almost the exact thing reply guys him with Romans 12. Completely irrelevant to the conversation. Completely. So what's going on here? By the way, Bendel, mwah, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I'm putting my hat back on because I'm Puerto Rican, man. I'm reasonable. So what's going on here? What's going on with Dr. Joseph Booth? So my most hinged take, and I saw some other people saying the same thing, and they said it in a better way than I did. But basically, this is an egghead fight. This is an egghead fight. And we've got one egghead, which is Dr. Joseph Booth, trying to get one over on another egghead, which would be Dr. Stephen Wolfe. Now, I don't want to call either of these guys eggheads, but they're both intellectuals, so they're eggheads. They're eggheads. They're not the grunts like me, you know what I mean? They're eggheads. So this is just an academic fight. This is just an academic thing, or someone's trying to score some points here, score some points there. Yeah, sure, they're cheap shots, but who doesn't take a few cheap shots every now and then? You're fighting for goodness sake. You're fighting for goodness sake. There's no rules in a bar fight. So there's no rules in an academic, slap fight, I guess. I don't know. I think that could be it. That could be it. There also is, of course, the kind of more base things in this egghead fight where, they don't exactly agree on a lot, but they do agree on a lot. But Dr. Joseph Booth wants his followers to know that even though what Dr. Stephen Wolfe sounds similar to what I believe, I'm totally against him. And this is just marking his territory, right? Because he knows, Dr. Joseph Booth knows that his fans will love it, no matter if it's relevant at all. Like, this is totally irrelevant to what Stephen was saying. And Dr. Joseph Booth, in this reactive, emotional place, completely fell into the trap. And I got to be honest, again, I haven't talked to Stephen. This trap could have been set specifically for Dr. Joseph Booth, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. And Dr. Joseph Booth just fell right into it, quoting Romans 12 like every other liberal on the planet has quoted Romans 12 to me. Totally irrelevant. It'd be relevant maybe if we didn't have Romans 13, but we do have Romans 13. So it's completely irrelevant. So there could be that. It could just be like a turf war, you know. He just wants to, show his gang that he's not with it. He's not about that life. You know what I mean? He's about this life over here. Could be that. That's maybe a little less hinged, but could be it. Or it could just be completely emotional and irrational and reactive. Like, I think that could be the most hinged possibility, but I don't. What I know about Dr. Joseph Boot doesn't strike me to believe that he's just in this completely wild place. I mean, maybe because I've said this too. Like Stephen Wolf has broken people's brains the way Trump has broken people's brains, and so people, because they don't like Trump so much, they'll say all kinds of things that don't make any sense based on their stated beliefs. And I think Stephen has the same effect on people. People hate Stephen so much that they say things that we know they don't believe. We know they don't because they've told us before. So it's just wild. Like they become deranged. Like there's definitely a Stephen Wolf derangement syndrome out there. Maybe that's the most hinged of all. I don't know. From what I know about Dr. Joseph Boot, I respect him too much. I don't think that that's what it is. But honestly, here's what I do think it is. And maybe you don't respect Dr. Joseph Boot that much. But I know people. I do respect Dr. Joseph Boot, but I know people. I know how people operate. If there's one thing I'm good at, I've got a lot of street smarts, you know what I mean? I'm good at reading people, and I'm good at, like, I have certain feelings that in my gut. Everybody has this. It's intuition, but like where I'm like, that guy's no good. You know what I mean? That guy's no good. And I can't really explain why he's no good, but he's no good. I'm not saying this about Dr. Joseph Boot, by the way, in case that's not clear. I'm not saying that. I'm just talking about my own experience. Like, I've even had an experience in my life where, and I don't think I've ever told anybody this. Honestly, I don't think I've told anybody this. It just came to my mind just now. But I was at community college when I was younger. I was probably like 13, 14. And my mom had taken some night classes, and I was like, I was going to go to a store with her afterwards. It was like nighttime, and so I went with her, and I was going to do my homework or whatever, you know. And I was in the lounge or whatever, and I was wearing a starter jacket. You'll understand why I'm saying that in a second. And this guy walks in, and it's me, and there's this young lady, probably like an 18, 19-year-old woman, at another table, and then this guy walks in. And he just sits there, probably another 18, 19-year-old. And I don't know why, I just got this feeling about this guy. Like, I didn't like him. He didn't even really look at me. But maybe that's what it was. I don't know. But I remember, being very uncomfortable with this guy being there. And I was young. I was 13 maybe. And I remember I was so uncomfortable that I remember talking to this woman that was there. I think I just asked her what the time was because I wanted to see when my mom would get out, whatever. And I was talking to her. I was out of nervousness, really, is what it was. And I wanted him to know that I wasn't afraid to talk or say things and stuff. And I knew I had to leave this situation before this woman left because I was like, I don't want to be alone with this guy, whatever. And I didn't get the impression that the guy wanted to do anything to the woman. I had this intuition that it had to do with me. And so I came up with a plan that I would gather my things quickly and leave, and I would push the double doors down the side as if I walked down that way, but then I would sneak into the other door and go up, and there was like an area that could look down into where I was sitting because I knew this place. So I did it. I pushed the double doors really loudly and obviously, and then I snuck into this other door and went upstairs. And when I got upstairs, the guy was gone. The woman was still there. The guy was gone. He had followed me out. And I was like dumbfounded. Like, I couldn't believe that there was really something with this guy. Like, in my mind, I'm like, there's nothing wrong. You're just going crazy. There really was. And I think he wanted to steal my starter jacket, or who knows what he wanted to do. I don't know. And then I just waited for my mom's, thing to be over and went to her room, and I sat outside her room, and everything was fine. But man, I got saved on that one. You know what I mean? Yeah, thank the Lord for that. Anyway, but I got good intuition. Here's what I think is going on. Sorry for that sidetrack. I think there's some jealousy here. I really do. Because I know a lot of these theonomist guys. I do. I know these guys. I don't know Dr. Joseph Boot, but I know a lot of theonomists and public ones too. And they've been treated like pariahs for years. They know what it's like. And their movement, it got big for a bit, but more recently it's been small. They can't get any traction. It's very hard to appeal to young people. I mean, they do good work with young people, but it is hard to appeal to young people at times. And it's been very small and on the fringes and all of this kind of stuff. And there's never really been too much traction. They did get some traction, of course, with Apologia. Apologia has done great work, and I commend them for all the work they've done. They've gotten a lot of traction. The theonomists have gotten a lot of traction through them. But it's been tough sledding. It really has. And it certainly seems like the time has come, at least online it feels this way. I'm not saying in the general public, but the time has come for the idea that a nation should be Christian and should have Christian laws and look out for Christian interests and be God's revenger against evildoers. To actually, self-consciously be God's revenger, his sword for vengeance upon evildoers. There's a groundswell of people, and there's a style to it, and there's an attraction to it, and there's a, dare I say, swagger to it, and it's gaining momentum. And even you read these articles from Mother Jones, these scare articles, and you could see it's obvious there's traction being made. Now, of course, Joseph Boot is going to disagree with some of the minutia of Stephen Wolfe, but the traction and really the goals are very similar, but the traction we're gaining is undeniable. And I think there's some jealousy. I really do. It doesn't have to be that way. I think that's an unhinged take, and I have very little evidence for that. It's just a feeling. It's just an intuition. So it's the least hinged of all my beliefs, but that's actually what I personally believe. I personally believe that people like Dr. Joseph Boot are kind of jealous of what Stephen Wolfe has accomplished, and also just the movement in general, that we still respect Dr. Joseph Boot, but we're not tied at the hip with them. Just because Dr. Joseph Boot doesn't like it or thinks we shouldn't do it, we're not going along with him. And I feel like there's probably like feeling a little spurned. Like, man, I was there when you were, 20 years old. I was there when you were a teenager teaching similar things. And now you just go for this guy who's got the right look, he's got the right vibe, he's got the right attitude, and he's got all these crazy Aristotelian ideas. Like, I taught you better than that. Like, I think there's a little bit of that going on. There's a feeling of being spurned a little bit. And I honestly believe a feeling of a little bit of jealousy. I really do think so. And it's not about money. It's not about fame. It's not about that. It's just about Dr. Joseph Boot did a lot of thankless work. He really did. And a lot of these guys did a lot of thankless work. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I'm not denying any of that. But they see Stephen Wolfe's popularity, and he's a popular guy. There's no question about it. And they realize, man, I've done all this work. How come I never got the attention from the media trying to say I'm the most evil guy around? And Stephen's getting all this attention. I think there's a little jealousy. That's what I think. Again, I warned you, it's a little unhinged. But I think it's as simple as that. I really do. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't. We could all work together, and we could still have our egghead fights, but we don't have to turn. What else could explain him turning into his own reply guy? He's his own reply guy now. What else could explain that? I don't know. But a lot of people see it. I mean, look at this one from Dustin E.J. D'Entremont. Dr. Boot, I love you, brother. Mission of God was fundamental to my political theology, so much so that I bought a copy for each of my elders. So I challenge you to be consistent with your own material. The state is God's instrument of vengeance against evil. Dustin is in exactly my position. He knows that this is the standard reply guy message to Dr. Joseph Boot's material. And he knows that Dr. Joseph Boot knows 12 comes before 13. He knows that Dr. Joseph Boot knows that. The problem is Dr. Joseph Boot taught us very well. We're not spurning you, man. We're not. We just don't think that you're infallible. We just don't think that, every single thing you think is the most dangerous thing is the most dangerous thing. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. And again, I'm going to take my hat off to Dr. Joseph Boot because him and a lot of other guys, they did a lot of thankless work. They had tough sledding, but they kept at it, and they're still doing it. They're still doing it, and you got to respect that. You do. You got to put some respect on Dr. Joseph Boot. But man, we don't have to do the thing where if we don't agree with every jot and tittle of your, nerdy fights with Stephen Wolf, that we're like the most dangerous people around. That we don't need you to turn into the reply guy. Because if this becomes what you become, it's not gonna go well for you. It's not gonna go well for you because you taught us too well. You taught us that when people do this reply to this kind of thing, it's like, yeah, but 12 comes before 13. We get it. We understand. Don't become your own reply guy. This is sad, bro. It's sad. And a lot of people saw it that way. This is not how it ought to be. But if you keep going on this path, I'm not going to dislike you. I still love you. You can't stop me from loving you. I've said this many times. I'm going to say it again. In any case, I hope you found this video helpful and encouraging and enlightening. God bless.